Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the past, the history of our world, in the history of collectible card games? Because that's what we're doing today. I'm going to be introducing you to another of our classic CCGs, which, in this case, is another one that has died out. Galactic Empires. One that was developed in the rush after Magic the Gathering came out. And I'll tell you the story, how to play it, and, some other information you might want to learn, product lines and stuff like that. It had some success, so come on, take my hand. I'm going to activate my time portal, send us back into the time, back into the 90s, to look into Galactic Empires. Your host and guide here, Tantus Naravan Dracovin. If you're ready, grab my hand. Remember to tip your guide, though, of course, like this is revenue developer YouTube, as we travel back in time and into space for Galactic Empires. So, Galactic Empires. This is part of the back of the card. I'll show you the full card design back, but it has a nice title for it. So, it's out of print. It's long since dead. It's a science fiction themed collectible card game, companion games with a publisher, and they published it from 94 until 97 when the company went bankrupt. The main designer was Carl Henry Schudel, I might butcher his name a little bit. It was designed for 2 or more players. It doesn't really have a setup time, say for, of course, setting up a deck ahead of time. And if you're playing a game, depending on the number of players, it can anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. There's some chance in it. Hey, it's deck building. And there's cards that you're going to play. Some basics of the game. Now we know some basics. Let's talk about those play basics. Here's one of the promos they had for the game back on the time. So it's a ship-based combat game. So think of something like if we are playing a grand strategy game like Stellaris, if you're familiar with that for a space game, or other space-based strategy games where you build up fleets and attack other peoples. There are different kinds of cards which can play to affect the ships or the combat you're going to be having. You have terrain points which give you resources to engage your ship's bases. Bases are played on terrain cards to help them. Crew and equipment can be played on bases and ships. See, they layer on top of each other. Abilities, which traditionally are played for crews or some other types of cards. Hazards, which could be space anomalies, which damage ships or other types of cards. Monsters, which are creatures that could attack various things. Luck cards to provide lucky or unlucky things. And occurrence cards. I will dive into the cards a lot more when I talk about the rules, but you see that there's a lot of variety of these cards which layer on top of each other to build into the experience. Now, when you're building a deck, well, you're going to have your deck themed around one of the released empires. There's a bunch of different empires that are released, and some minor empires. The minor empires you can use to supplement your major one. You should have at least 40 cards in your deck. But because of the rules for how you build your deck, it was a little restrictive in certain types of cards. And if you want very powerful cards, you need a really large deck. That's one of those things. The more powerful cards you have, the larger your deck has to be. So, if we looked at tournaments at the time that were run, those decks were between 100 to 150 cards. Meaning that, unlike a lot of other games, slimmed down decks don't help. You need a big, chonky deck for this game to make it work a lot. Interestingly enough. Now let's go back in time, though, to the release of Galactic Empires. This is in the big boom of collectible card games that came out after Magic came out in 93. Magic comes out. It's this huge hit. Everybody's getting on it. Everybody's developing CCGs, a new type of gameplay. And this game, its time period is kind of a little bit up in the air exactly when it was released. It could be the third, but it's kind of hard to tell with the time period. We know that Magic the Gathering and Spellfire were the first 2 really big ones. But certainly, even if it's not the third game, it's in that early push of them. And it was certainly the first actual science fiction CCG that came out. And this is late 94. And this, of course, lasted until it stopped. Unfortunately. So, this is that first wave, and we're getting into it. As it is right now. Those first cards are difficult to find. They were designed by, of course, Carl Henry Schute, and he did the writing for it along with John Hammer. he worked with art director Richard Rouse and Edward Beard Jr., and their initial beta and alpha, well, alpha and beta, were released in August of 94. Eventually, though, like Magic before, which had an alpha, beta, and then finally unlimited, it had a full limited, which they called Series 2 Primary Edition, which was released in December of 94. That primary one was 421 cards, sold in 55-card starter decks and 12-card booster packs. This is the initial release that we can actually think of as Galactic Empires during this time period. This is the first of the actual product line. Now, we do have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's why the game died. Bankruptcy. Companion Games, I found their logo here, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in early 1996, but continued to release products during its reorganization. So this is the back end of the product releases. There were still expansion sets, a revised core set that came out, Series U, Universal Edition they called it, and they were released over this kind of period here. And all this ended abruptly when they filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy in May of 1997. That was truly the death of the game, when the company that was producing it went into Chapter 7. I'm not going to get into details about the two types of bankruptcy. Chapter 11 is a much more softer bankruptcy than Chapter 7. Just keep that in mind. Chapter 11 meant reorganization, and they could have survived. Chapter 7 was the death. Carl Schult expressed hope that that people would purchase the what's left over of Companion Games and continue Galactic Empires, but no. Galactic Empires was left to die, unfortunately. Promo card from Mayfair Games. So there were 3,208 cards that were printed, but several hundred were promotional cards. Ones like this that were done to specific groups. We'll talk about the promotional cards a little bit more in detail a little later on, but just keep in mind, things like this that, hey, it says Mayfair Games Incorporated. Company's still around today. They had a promo card for Galactic Empires. So, because of this kind of way they did promo cards, some are really difficult to obtain. Because there's hundreds of them. So by the time of the demise, though, we will say they did have 40 different empires, meaning that you had 40 different base deck ideas, and 16 distinct tribes of one of the empires, the Adrian Nomads. And then plus all the minor empires, meaning that there was a lot of complexity in the different ways you could go. And again, these different empires and sub-empires and all these things were in varying numbers and levels of playability. Some were better than others, some were not. Some were more developed. Certainly things that were in earlier editions and more core editions are probably better developed. But yeah, we can see that the game itself had a level of development, and there was a lot of variety to build decks in. But again, whether that deck is super viable or not, I'm not going to answer that because we'd have to look into the actual cards. I'm not diving too deep into that. Let's talk about the sets and expansions that came out. Now, here we go, Series 1. Here are an example of an alpha and a beta product line. So, alpha came out, and that was the first of our two ones in our Series 1. This is your area around August, September of 94. The alpha edition. These were largely Empire's artwork and lore. And the thing is, what Companion Games was using was the lore Empire's artwork that they'd already done in a game called Starfleet Battles that was a war game that they were running. These were tests. Alpha was 91 cards. Beta had some artwork changes, a few rules updates, and was 90 cards and came out closer to October. And these were the first two of the empires. So I'll never mention all the empires that were released in all the sets. I might. But the Argonian First Republic and Krivas Capitalist Alliance were released here. They were released in 10-card booster packs and 50-card starter decks. The stars had a fixed selection of cards, including ships from both empires. Each empire's ship had unique abilities, as well as unique cards that could be played to their ships to improve them. It did have some minor empires during this time. The distinction that the major empires could only be used in decks built around that major empires, where minor empires can be helpful to. This is kind of establishing the situation that you have major, minor empires, you only have two of the major, you've got some minor, you're building out what the game will be. This is the first time. Then we get into the primary edition, Now, this is technically Basic Deck B, I'll talk about it in a second, but this was released in December of 94. And it had around 440 cards in this set. It was greatly expanded. This is the first true core set that they had. Now, of course, it did have the Argonian Kribis, but had two other new major empires. The Machads had Holdfast and Corporate Aggressors. And a couple minor empires that became big during the time here. Bolar Pirates, Idrian Nomads, Veteran Mercenaries, and Space Dragons. The cards had rarity at this point in time. Common, uncommon, rare, very rare, entity. Entity? It's a weird rarity, but yes. Common, uncommon were distributed very equally amongst packs, but common were what appeared in starters, making them more common. That's why they were common. So that's the big differences. If you bought a pack, you get the same number of common and uncommon, but if you bought a starter, which gave you a lot of good things, it was filled with common cards. Hey, that's why there's more of them. The booster boxes had 36 cards, 36 packs, each with 12 cards. The two starters were Basic Deck A, with Argonian Kribis, which were from Series 1, and then the Basic Deck B, shown here, that had Machad and Corporate Ships. These had 50 common cards and 5 random uncommon cards. Alright, let's talk about the one expansion that was released in German. This is Series G, as you could call it. This is the only foreign edition of the game. And it came in Germany kind of mid-95. The exact date is a little bit open-ended from looking into it. They're based on Primary Edition, but cut down to 299 cards. There's only 4 rarities: uncommon, common, uncommon, rare, entity. It reduced things that cut out the ability cards of Dragon Empire. And since there weren't any dragons, they couldn't use the previous artwork. So this is the artwork of Series 3, New Empires, they used for the foreign language one. But this is technically Primary Edition Series 2, just a German version of it cut down, removed some stuff, and using artwork from the Series 3. Series 3, New Empires, was the first big expansion, 210 cards. We introduced a bunch of new empires: Clyden Empire, Plasma Occupy Carry, POT, Scorpede Dominion, Corfor Proctorate, the Minor Empire. I'm going to butcher these a lot. Nigrinity Pirate Iridium Nomads Tribe. It had Basic Deck C, which contained Pot and Scorpede cards. It was, again, 50 cards. But this one was fixed and 50 commons and had no random cards like before. Power of the Mind! We've reached Series 4. So this was released in July of 95. So we're mid-year of 95. We got another expansion, 152 cards, 2 major empires, Psi-based, Psychantian Dasonic, a parasitic race called Flitterian Infestors, which take over ships. It is a very interesting one that this does have some problems with these empires and groups. A little weakness because they have a very different style of gameplay than some of the others at this point in time. They had no starters either, which made it more difficult to build decks based on it. Remember, you could buy a starter that had a bunch of commons that could be a basis for building a deck. You get 50 cards that are set to build it, it helps you start that out. This, they only had boosters. Now, it did introduce Psi rules and using their abilities. We'll talk about that. But they had, if you wanted to build a deck from any of these empires, you'd have to get the 36 card packs with each. Unfortunate. Alright, we hit up Series 5. We're almost halfway done through here for Time Gates. So, this was August of 95. So, 157 card expansion. One of the strongest expansions. It had time cards. 2 minor empires, Time Knights and Time Traveling Trovan Empire. These are minors, remember, so you can use them in any big empire. This introduced minor empires that are very powerful that people would probably add to your decks. They work well to support other decks. Time Origins from Time Knights, Trojan Ships, a few others that could move when destroyed in the main play, and had booster boxes. Again, since you didn't have a primary empire, it did make sense. Now we get to our, hey, Universe Edition. I talked about this a little bit when we said this is like their U series. They numbered the series, technically Roman numeral the series, but this was their, like, revised from Magic, or another core edition that came out. This was November of 95. It is a major core set, 564 cards. It's replacing Primary Edition and New Empires. So most of the cards come from Series 2 and 3, though they do have a few cards from Series 4 and 5. So it is combining together a bunch of the different series together to make a new core set. Very much so revised, but primarily focusing on the two big ones. And a booster box is, of course, 6 cards, 14 cards. 10 different 100-card starter decks. They're relatively playable, themed for a single empire. Each had a window in the back of the box so you could see one of the Empire-specific cards on the deck, allowing you to differentiate which deck it's for. So that was the interesting thing is, if you just look at the box, it doesn't mention which of the 10 empires it is, but you can look at the back and be like, oh, this is this empire. Cool, I want to buy this starter deck. All-Stars would be labeled Universal Edition no matter what they belong to. 80 cards were randomized, 20 were fixed for the empire of the deck. And they were the Argonian, Clydon, Corporate, Krebs, Mecheta, Pot, Scorpede, Space Dragons, Torfor, Vectri. So we've gotten to our core set. Advanced Technologies, Series 6. Now we've reached the 96 region of things. This was a 152 card set, which is getting into the end of 95, 96. Power cards for ships and various empires, as well as upgrade for their ships. It did introduce a new Iridian tribe, the Valakar Volar 5, and it was in booster packs. Piracy, Series 7. So we reached into 96 more, getting deeper into 96. And there's a 205 card expansion themed around pirates. It reprinted and added to the Volar pirates and Grecian pirates, as well as adding the new empire, Lopen Conquistadors, and 2 minor empires, the Corporate pirates and Vicious 6 Agrivian pirate tribe. Boosters, boxes containing 80 packs of 6 cards. So different change in the way that they did cards. Now we've got a more interesting one, and I couldn't find, this is the sector map for the, or sector HQ for this one, because I couldn't find packs of this. Comedy Club on the Far Side of the Galaxy, Series 8. Yep. So we've reached into mid to late summer of 96. 174 card expansion for this one. And it was in 4 different 100 card starters. Each starter had a pre-selected set of cards, many of which had up to 4 versions, which only differated from different quotes on them. It's basically a joke set. This is like the unhinged, unglued stuff from Magic. And it did introduce a new major empire based around ancient installations of the Comedy Club network. So, it could be argued that there's also maybe only 100 cards in the set, because again, they're different versions, but it's sort of like 174, 100 different cards, 174 actual different cards. You talk the different versions. Series 9. We're getting towards the end of here. Things aren't going great. We're getting towards the end of 96. It's a 205 card expansion themed around the Persona class of cards. Cards that were unique and only one of which could be played at a time. It increased a crude-based empire, the Nobles and the Lone Wolf Igridium tribe, and a decent mix of useful and powerful cards. It was in booster boxes of 6 cards, 80 packs to a box. Almost done with the releases. See, it released a lot. And we get to Galactic Invaders. This is getting into end of 96, into early 97. We're not quite done with things yet, but definitely we're on the way out as the company isn't doing great. 256 card expansion, had several new empires, 5 new 100 card starter decks with major empires, the Aquaran, Deknut, Chixar, Zedrin, as well as minor empire Orgon, It was kind of spread apart, because originally the starter decks were released as part of this, and eventually the booster boxes were released, introduced another minor empire, the Dracovin, and Andromeda Bound Ephrygian Tribe. So, this is a well-regarded set with new empires, unique, well-balanced, a little powerful. When you got to the booster boxes, it's 80 card packs with 6 stars, and the starters were 101 cards, each with 21 new cards for the new empires, and 80 cards from the Universe Edition to fill out the starters. So those original starters were some new cards. You got the full thing when the booster boxes were released eventually down the line. So it's like we had 2 releases for this one here. And the final of the main releases, which again I couldn't find a good pack for, so I got a picture of one of the special cards from there. The Allied Forces, Series 11, the final one. This is the one that came out in 97. 145 cards, released in a set of 12 100-card starter decks. Each contained 20 new cards from New Empire and 80 cards from Universe Editions. A few of the decks were from previous released empires, including Bowler Pirates, Corporate Pirates, Lepan Nobles, and Tragalians. Decks for the first 3 empires contained both reprinted cards from the piracy and new cards. The remaining 7 starters introduced new allied empires, minor empires which were allied with one of the major empires. They could be used as minor empire cards in decks of any empires. They had some game mechanical benefits if they used their allied empires. So they basically could be connected, like this is Drone, which is allied to Mechad, and so if you use Drone with Mechad, it's better, but it could be used in any. And I won't go over all of them, but that's what they do. So, we continued with promos. So, there were at least 7 promotional card runs that were printed for the game. And, as I said, there was around 360 cards. A number of Space Dragons, Bowler Pirates, and Greedy Pirate ships were released as promotional cards, as well as Stek's Minor Empire. A number of Dredian tribes were introduced as part of these promotional sets, including a bunch of them. It had the distinction of releasing the most promotional cards of any CCG for at least a decade after they went out of business, because they started allowing people and companies to do special promotional cards with their name, or business name, or phone numbers, or contact information on them. So many game stores and distributors ordered cards and handed them out or sold them as a form of business card or premium card to players and collectors. Remember, I showed the Mayfair Games card at the beginning. Here's another promo card that you can see like here. But it's got information on it at links. It was an interesting way of promo cards. Hey, it's a promo card, but it's also a business card for you who wants to set and give us out our business cards. There were some other products that came out other than the main series of things. This is the Primary Tactics audio drama that was on cassette and CD, voicing the voice talents of Alexander Siddig. It was packaged with 2 promo cards. You could find it online if you want to listen to it. There was also a playmat released. Both of these were in May of 96, and it came with the promo card itself. So a lot of, again, promo cards came out like there's no tomorrow. If you got the audio drama, you got the playmat, you get a promo card also. Interesting, that one. Now, this isn't the end, though, because we do know what they were planning a little bit. There were 2 expansions that were planned that never came out, unfortunately, because the company died. One for July of 97, and the other in August of 97. Remember, they went out in May. The first expansion, Realm of the Ancients, was planned to be released in 97, sold in 5-card booster packs. And the second was Comedy Club Part 4, as another kind of comedy set. Their second one, they call it Point 4, and it was going to be in 100-card fixed starter decks. The thing is, again, it takes some time to plan things out. We probably had some basic information online about them, but everything went crap before they could be released, so we just know that these expansions were planned before that Chapter 7 bankruptcy eventually happened, and it's apart. Let's talk about the rules. How to play. Sure, we all want to kind of also learn that here for the back end of what we're going to be talking about today. So, let's do that. Let's learn how to play Galactic Empires. At least the basics. I'm not going to go to full depths about the rules, but I'll give you enough that you know how to play. So, this is the far side of the galaxy. A bunch of empires are battling it out. That's the basics. It is from 2 to 12 players. Each has your own deck of cards. Each of you has a sector HQ. You deploy starships that are protect your sector HQ and destroy the sector HQs of your opponents. Terrain produces energy that you use to operate your ships. If your HQ is destroyed, you're no longer capable of controlling your fleet. You leave play, and all the players continue until only one sector HQ remains. Pretty basic standard rules. So yeah. There are 4 major things you have to keep in mind. The cards have rules. This is the most important thing in the game. The cards have rules defined on them. So if it's not something that's in the rule book, it's on the card. Basically is where it is. And the rules on the cards may contradict the rules of the rule book. The rules of the cards take precedent. And there is flavor text on the cards. That's not rules. Last reaction card has precedence. This is the second thing. When we talk about reactions, the order of play matters. The last one takes precedence, and then it goes backwards. It's kind of very much stack in Magic. 3, player turn sequence. There are 7 phases. You should really know what those are. You know, it's a very linear fashion. You take your 7 phases, the next person takes their 7 phases, goes around the board. There's a limit on card actions. A card in play may only perform each of its functions once a turn, from the point of view of the controlling player. There are additionally, functions on a card used as a reaction may only be used once per complete turn. And when we talk about complete turn, it's for both of these. That means it goes from you back into when your next turn starts. So, okay. Let's take a look at a card. What does this all mean here? So, in our upper top left corner is the card type. This is an S here, so that means it's a ship. I'll talk about all the different card types in the future. There are some that have 2 card types that will have a slash, meaning they're both. Sometimes they have an R. R is not a card type. It means there's something related to reactions. It's a special thing. And the card R will be in front, meaning it's a reaction card, and that reaction ability can only be played on an opponent's turn, in reaction to an opponent's action. But it could be a reaction and something else, meaning you could play it. There's other rules for it, basically, yes. But, yes. We'll talk about reactions, but those are the symbols there. Card strength is the second number. This is a 7. That's the top left corner. It ranges from 1 to 10. Some will have 2 strengths. Those are doing with time origins and stuff, special stuff like that. We're not getting into that. Then we have point requirements. These symbols that are listed immediately after card type and strength, these are the points required to operate the card. Meaning that these are the points that I have to be producing from my terrain in order to have this card used on a turn. As a requirement. Then we have the card title, Argonian Battlecruiser here. Argonian Battlecruiser here. Then we have generated points. Now, there's actually a couple different symbols. I'm only showing one here. There's shields. But basically, in the upper right corner, if a card creates points, whether it's a terrain or something else, it's going to have it there in the upper right corner. Those are shield symbols, which are the shields that protect this thing from damage, not generated points. There can also be fleet modifier points, which are up on the right, which is will have a mathematical symbol, minus or plus. That adds things to a fleet. And they're found in the same place as generated points, basically. But they'll have a plus symbol. Card modifier points are below the illustration on the right that modify another card. They're explaining the rules. So we don't have a lot of modifications there. So then we just have some card rules and weapons at the bottom. Which we'll talk about the weapon symbols there too. But now you've got an idea. Type of card, strength, requirements to use it during a turn, whether it generates points in the upper left corner, or if it has shields as a ship, any kind of special point-related things that it does, and or abilities on the rules text, and weapons down at the bottom. We have an idea of it, but again, I'm only showing one card type. I'll show more of the card types back in this. Let's talk about building a deck. So, you need to have a deck to start out with. Whether you're using a pre-made one, or you are basically building your own deck, you need one. You keep a Sector HQ separate from your deck. This is where you keep track of damage that's scored on your HQ. It's a card that is not required to play, technically, and it does not count towards a card in your deck. So it's one of those things is, you just need something that will keep track of your 25 health, and it says what your empire is. So it's that kind of interesting thing. So you don't really need the Sector HQ card to play, technically, because it doesn't do anything. Because cards are not played on your Sector HQ, and it cannot be repaired. Normal circumstances. Basically. Then you build a deck. You have to basically... There's some basic deck building rules. I'll go over the very basics here. You know, we're not going to go too deep into deck construction here, but you announce your empire, you stock your card with one main empire, and then have some minor empires in there. And so, here's a little bit of a complex thing to explain, but I'll try to do it my best. There are a lot of card types. Your deck has to be at least 40 cards. Of all the different card types, remember, I said R is not a card type, but all the other letters, you need at least 8 different card types and 5 of each of those 8 types in a deck minimum. Meaning that your minimum 40 card deck will have 8 of the different card types at least, and 5 of each of those. After that, you could have more than 5. And you could have more than 8 types. But anything like if you have a 9th or 10th type, they'd only know you to have at least 1. It's just that the basic deck rules say, of 8 of the types of all the types, which is like, there's 17 types of cards. Okay? 17 types. You only need 8 of those in your deck and 5 of each of them. Again, as we talked about, for the way that things are built, having more points, having more stuff in bigger decks is good in a lot of ways. For each card in the deck, there must be at least 1 card of each strength up to the highest strength card of that type in a deck. So if you want a set strength 6 ship, let's say, you have to have ship cards 1 to 5. Remember we said 100 to 150 card decks are really good because those better cards. Remember, each type has its own strength. So if I want to play with those S cards, those ship cards, and I want to have a rank 10, I have to have at least ranks 1 to 9 to build up to that. Same could be said for any other type of card, because each card has a strength. So the stronger the cards you have, the more cards you need. Hence big decks. There are 3 exceptions to the rule. Let's see here. Let me just, anyway. I won't get into those. I'm not going to get the exceptions, actually. We'll skip that out, because that's just extra fluff. But there's a couple exceptions to those rules if you want to look into them for deck building. Keeping it simple. But basically, yes, your card is going to have 1 major empire, the one that's announced as going to be your headquarters, the one you're playing with, the major one of your cards, and then generic ships, because there are generic ships, don't count as a minor empire, but you can use 1 minor empire card in your deck for every 4 cards of the same type that are not a minor empire. So keep that in mind when building minor empires into your deck. You need, so if you're using ships, you need 4 ships, which generic ships don't count, for the purpose of this rule, but you need 4 major empire ships for every 1 minor empire ships. And Adrian tribe cards count as a half a card, which is kind of weird, and basically dragon cards count as ship cards for that. Okay. Now, the last thing for deck building we have to talk about is a reserve fleet. What the heck have we been doing here? This is getting complex. But no, this is the deck building kind of thing here. Okay, a reserve fleet is a number of cards which can be brought into play more or less at will without having to rely on luck. You basically set up a little bit of like, I can just play these. Yeah, adventure shit. Basically, when you create a reserve fleet, you remove a number of cards of any type from your deck equal to or lesser than the number of players that start the game. If you play with 2 players, you can remove 2 cards. If you play with 12 players, remove 12 cards. You set them aside, face down, not exposed to other players until after the start of the game. So basically, everybody will know what's in someone's reserve fleet, but they don't know until the game has started. So keep that in mind. Your reserve fleet cards will be revealed. As a card player, a player may swap from your hand a card from your reserve fleet. So basically, instead of playing a card normally, you swap it from your reserve fleet. The card placed in the fleet must be equal to or higher strength than the card removed. So if you remove a, let's say, S3, you have to put in at least a 3 strength card or more. And it does count as one of your plays on a turn. We'll talk about that when we talk about your turn. There are some restrictions in reserve fleet, but we won't really get into that too much now. But that's just the basic ways of building a reserve fleet. So. Alright. Let's start our game. This is the back of one of the start boxes, which has a lot of text on it. Learn our basics of how to play the game. Alright. So you've got your deck. You got reserve fleet. You shuffle all the remaining cards in your deck together. You know, you pulled out the reserve fleet. The reserve fleet still face down. You set it aside. And any player may, like, shuffle, cut your deck, you know. Then you take the top card of your card and reveal it. This is the anti-card. I'm going to tell you now, it's not anti like Magic the Gathering. Basically, the highest strength anti goes first. Second highest goes second. Third highest goes third. Ties are resolved by a die. And you're supposed to sit down at wherever you're playing in the order that you've built with this. So, like, if I'm highest, I sit down first, and then we kind of go around that way. Now, when we talk about ante, we usually think of Magic the Gathering, of the old ante rules, where if you won the game, you get to keep the cards. That is an optional rule here. But in the basic rules here, your ante card becomes your first card in your discard pile. You basically discard. The optional, if you win the game, you get all the cards, is something that everybody has to agree to. It's not normally part of the rules. It is, again, like an option. You can choose to wager your cards in an ante, but honestly speaking, I can see the idea of the ante as a, like, we reveal the top card, that's our starting order. Interesting, it goes to discard. I like that better, that it's not necessarily an ante. Again, every fight puts 25 points of damage. When you're removed from the game, all your cards are removed from play. Any cards played to or against that player is placed on. It goes to discard pile. So, like, if I had cards on me or I played cards on someone else, they still all go to the discard pile. And anytime a player scores 6 or more points of damage on another player's sector HQ with weapons fire, that player may immediately draw a card from their deck to their hand. So there is a bonus to doing a lot of damage to somebody. After all the ante's been drawn, all the players expose their reserve fleet by placing them face up on the table in the area designed as the reserve fleet. You try not to preserve your reserve fleet and your active fleet, keep them separate, and then you draw 9 cards from your deck. The first player begins his turn, does the turn sequence, and then it goes to the second player and come on. Let's talk about that turn sequence in our ad here. I like the little ads that I can find for this game. So, we do have to define turn and complete turn. Player turn, complete turn. Complete turn is, I take my turn, everybody takes their turn, it comes back to me. That's a complete turn. A player turn is just my turn. So keep those in mind. So the first thing you do is point allocation phase. Pretty easy. This is previously played cards whose duration expire are discarded as the first thing on the turn. Cards which produce or modify point output generate their effects before being discarded. Ships can change location during this time. I'm not really going to get into ship movement, but they can. All shields regenerate 1 point. And then you allocate. Terrains generate points. I'll talk about it a little more in detail when I talk about terrain and points a little bit more. But the points are allocated to cards as desired by the owning player. They must be allocated 2 cards each turn. All such point allocation only occurs during this early phase of points allocation. Only a card which receives all its point requirements may receive additional points to operate its heavy weapons, special systems, or equipment. Crew cards on disengaged cards can receive points though too, so keep that in mind. So crew can get them separate, but you have to pay at least the basic requirements to engage the card before you give it extra points to do special things in the card. If they're not used during allocation, they're lost. Cards which have a point requirement and generate points will generate points if they are engaged. Basically, when I talked about there could be ones that have a requirement, but also it generates some points, you have to meet that requirement before they generate stuffs. Now, phase 2, engagement phase. If you receive points, they're engaged. They're basically, it's the difference between tapped and not untapped in Magic. That's a very easy thing. They're going to be vertical if they're engaged, horizontal if they're disengaged. There you go. Cards without point requirements remain engaged. Hey, they didn't have a requirement. Cards that did not receive requirement remain disengaged and are placed horizontally. They can't operate. This basically kind of plays together with the previous phase. It's pretty easy. Then you have your first play phase. Phase 3. A player can play a maximum of 3 cards during your turn. So, from my hand, I can play 3 cards. Card actions of cards in play, or just play, may occur only once during the turn during this phase or the second card play phase. Basically, remember, I talked about it. There are 2 basically, this is like main phase, second main phase in Magic. Again, I'm comparing it to Magic, but that's the one that a lot of people know when it comes to CCGs. That you get 2 times with combat in the middle, it's the same here, that you can play cards. During those 2 phases, you can play a maximum of 3 cards. You can play all 3 beginning, all 3 after. But then, every card that is engaged or just played may take its actions once during this turn. Meaning, those 3 cards I played could get their whatever they're at to do an action of that card, or everything that I have engaged on the board could do an action during the turn. I don't have to use all those actions, but I have the option to use those actions during my turn during the play cards phases, A and B. Then in phase 4, of course, is the weapons fire one. There are targets that can be fired upon with weapons. Terrain, ships, dragons, size, bases, installations, free-flying shuttles, and cards that say they can be destroyed by damage. Those are your standard targets. You declare weapons fire to a single target from any number of engaged cards in your fleet with 1 or more unfired weapons. Those weapons volley. Easy way to say that is, basically, I get to choose which ships fire on you. I'm choosing these ships to fire on this target. Players may read reactions, resolve the effects of weapons, resolve the effects of the reactions, whether the target is destroyed or damaged. And again, basically you choose a target, and then choose the cards that are targeted. And you could do this multiple times for multiple targets if you have a whole bunch of different weapons. But keep in mind, each of the things that's firing weapons can only be used once to fire weapons. You can only declare 1 weapons volley against each target during the weapons fire phase 2. Meaning if I fire a bunch of weapons at something, expecting it to be destroyed, but use a reaction to save it, I can't fire on it again. Then we get to the phase B, where you finish up playing your cards for the turn. Up to 3 between the 2 play card phases. Any engaged cards that didn't take their action may take them now. Phase 6 is your discard phase. Unused card plays may be used to discard cards from your hand. Player may discard any number of cards from your fleet. Hey, I can get rid of ships. There's reasons behind it. Cards which are yours, but under the control of another player, or cards which you cannot control because of an effect of a card played, may not be voluntarily discarded until you regain control. Basically, if you don't have control of something, basically, you can't discard it. Remember, I did say you can discard cards from your fleet voluntarily. But if you don't control it, or someone else controls a card, you can discard it. Then you have your draw card phase. If you have 9 or fewer cards in your hand, you draw 2 cards. If you have 10 or 11 cards, you draw 1. If you have 12 cards, you draw 0 cards. That's why you may want to use plays to discard cards from your hand if you have stuff that's not very helpful. Get new cards. Okay, now that we understand the turn, our 3 plays, our weapons fire, that kind of thing, let's talk about some of the basics of the rules. When you have different versions of cards, the newest printed version is the big one. Only terrain cards may be played during the first turn. Reserve fleet swaps may only occur, may also be made on turn 1. So these are restrictions on turn 1. So, like, your first turn, you're only playing terrain. Remember, I got 3 card plays. Turn 1, I'm only playing terrain. Or maybe swapping for things in reserve. That's why I might have a terrain in my reserve just in case I didn't draw one. Turn 2 restrictions. Any card type must be played on turn 2 except maximum of 1 ship-based dragon installation or side card can be played. So basically it opens it up. But 1 aggressive thing will only be played on turn 2. All cards with point requirements, hey, are played in the disengaged position. Remember, I could say, when I told you, play a card, you could use this ability. If it doesn't have a point requirement. Because it's played engaged position. If it's played disengaged, you can't use it. And a card's not considered to be in play until after you've played it. Hey! Disengaged cards don't take actions. They can still be targeted with weapons. They still have shields, or repair those shields, or repair themselves. Engaged cards can cards on disengaged cards function. That's also another thing. So if I can engage something that's connected to it, like a crew or equipment that's connected to a ship that I can engage, it does still do its things, even though the ship itself could be disengaged. And also, non-passive equipment on a disengaged unit must be disengaged. So, you know, it also depends on the stuff on the card, too. Anyway. Let's see. Let's talk discard pile. Cards in the discard pile must remain in order which they are discarded. Some cards that search through there or remove from the discard pile makes a difference. Hey, it's very much so like Magic. You don't shuffle this. Cards in play may perform only 1 action each of their functions once per complete turn. Additional functions of that card used as a reaction may be only used once per complete turn. Cards are always limited to active once a turn. The fact that each turn was listed on cards led some people to believe that the cards without clause can function multiple times. Okay. Let's talk reactions. Cool. Here's a reaction card. That's also a crew member, interestingly enough. So a card with an R may be played in reaction to an opponent's action on an opponent's turn. They cannot be played in reaction to your own turn unless reacting to an opponent's reaction card. So if an opponent played reaction and you react to that card, then you can do that. Cards played in reaction don't count as your card's play limit when played during another player's turn. They do count as your card play when played on your own turn, and may not be played if all card plays are already used. Remember, I said you could play it in reaction to an opponent's reaction. You still have to have card plays for that. A reaction card may only be played in reaction mode if one of its functions is used at the time it's played. Basically, I play a reaction. It has to be able to do something, regardless of the play phase. Except reaction cards, except reaction cards can only fire their weapons if played in an opponent's weapon fire phase, and only if they do not need resource points to function. So basically, like, if you play like a reaction starship that could, you know, it pops out, it could fire. It can't have points in order to fire its weapon. If it doesn't have that, it can just fire its weapon. Then it can do that. basically. Cards played in reaction can generate points and apply them to another card. They cannot cause that card to engage unless it specifically says so. But it could be like, oh, I generate some points that my ship could use for special abilities. But it could also possibly engage a ship if it says so. Reaction cards that are not played in reaction mode will not generate points outside of the allocation phase. I could play this as a crew card. It is also a crew card. So if I played it as a crew card, and let's say it generated points, it wouldn't do that except during the allocation phase. Playing it as a reaction does it as a special extra points. If a card is removed from play as a reaction before being resolved, the last card will be resolved upon returning to play. Last reaction has precedence, of course. And there are reaction modes of cards already in play. Our friend here. Some cards can perform actions in reaction mode even if they're already in play. It says they as a reaction can. This one has when played. So this one doesn't say that. This doesn't say as a reaction. This says when played in reaction, the transportation at location may be used to transport the Marine. But discard a crew or equipment? Basically, yes. Some will say as a reaction, which means it can do a reaction and will be able to do it multiple times if it's already in play. I have my card out. It's already in play. And once per full turn, I can activate that thing's reaction. Reaction cards already in play cannot react unless it stays as a reaction. This just has our good friend here, Marine, when played as a reaction. It does something else when played as a reaction. But there are some that, when already played, can react again. Let's talk command. Command limits and command slots. And a little bit on control. We're getting close to being done the full rules here. Well, the card types will be a big part here. But we're diving deep into the rules here. I know. This is going to be a long video, but bear with me. We're learning the rules. Your fleet has a command limit. It's the maximum of cards which require command slots the player normally can have. Cards which consume one command slot each include ships, dragons, and bases, with strength of 3 or higher. Ships which consume half a command slot include all psi cards, ships of strength 2, and dragons and bases of strength 2. No other cards consume command slots. So now we know we have a certain number of command slots. Combined cards require the command slots of their combined strength, basically. So you add the strength together that determines it. But again, if you're 3 or higher, yeah. During the allocation phase, each player automatically generates a number of command points equal to the number of players that started the game. Doesn't change when players are eliminated. So if you're playing with 2 people, you get 2 command points. This number plus any generated command points is the number of command slots you have. Starbase here. Yeah. Generates 2 command points. Those are the little stars on the bottom of it. Remember, that's generation. Starbase, this base, generates 2 command points. We'll talk about points. But yeah. This is 2 extra command, 2 extra powerful ships, or 4 extra small ships. Cards that generate command points can only do an allocation phase. A card played that generates command points cannot be used to that command point create command slot until allocation phase. If a player has full command slots and loses some command points, they don't discard cards, which consume command slots. So basically, if my starbase gets destroyed, and I had more stuff that required command points, I don't lose those things. Basically, yeah. I don't have to discard them. Cards that require command points as a point requirement cannot receive command points during the allocation phase until all other cards occupying command slot have their command point allocated to those slots. So I don't have to get rid of those cards. But basically, to use those cards this is an extra level of energy or points allocation, resources you have to think about. I generate the command points depending on cards I have in play, and also how many players there are. This tells me how many ships I can command. So yeah. It basically allows me to use those ships. Again, not only have to pay the resources, but I have to have the command points available. And the command slots available. Some may require command points to use, also, as a payment. But I have to pay the basic 1 to each of the things I have to pay command points to keep the limit. Unused command points always create empty command slots, and calculating command slots never drop fractions. A minor Empire ship in play in fleet does not consume a command slot and may be played even if all command slots are full. However, if that minor Empire is being used as the main Empire of the player's deck, then ships of that main minor Empire do not gain this benefit. Basically, minor Empire ships don't count. We kind of go over the basics of a control. On your turn, on the turn that control of an engaged opponent card is established, that card could be used normally as if it was engaged when the control was established. If a controlled card has point requirements, that the controlling player must allocate these points during allocation phase or use it in subsequent turns. A controlled ship protects the sector HQ of the controlling player. So, yeah. Alright. Fractions I'll just mention too. I should do that before we finish it here. Whenever fractions generated from mechanic of the game is dropped, not rounded. Rule requiring the full points are required to do this. Thus, half a repair point does nothing. 3/4 of a point of damage does not destroy a ship with only 1 point left. Remember, command points is the only place you don't drop the fractions. Otherwise, fractions are just dropped. They're not rounded, they're dropped. Keep that in mind. Let's talk damage. Just a little bit here. And we'll talk points, and then card types, and finish up today. So during weapon fire phase, hey, you designate a target, and how much damage is being applied. Which units from the fleet are firing, and how much damage they're firing. A weapon ball. Damage to Sector HQ, I talked about that. Only a ship, dragon, or psi card may fire at Sector HQ or psi node. Equipment cards when played on these cards may also fire at them. There is splash damage. Splash damage may only occur when a player plays a card in reaction to weapons fire at a target, and that reaction card would protect. If there is sufficient damage to destroy the reaction card, then is destroyed and the remaining damage supplied to the original target. And there could be damage to the too. You use dice to keep track of damage. If a ship takes 4 points of damage, place a die on that card with 4 shoving. They say a 6-sided die. Damage is inflicted and repaired. Simply change the number on the die with the current amount of damage from the ship. Damage to shields and damage to the ship itself should be tracked separately to different colored dice. Dice should also be used to keep track of the research points applied to monsters, current strength of various other things. So yes. Anyway, let's talk points. I clipped this, so this is the types of points. Economy points are the open circles. They're useful points. They can be declared and used to supply energy, ammunition, research, repair, or healing points. During the allocation phase on each player's turn, they declare what his economy points are used for. Each point may be used as a different point each turn. Basically, each point is used individually. They are not modified by modifiers which modify other types of points, even when the economy point is used for that other type. So, economy points can be used for all these other point types. And per turn, you choose what it's used for, but it's not modified by things that modify. Let's say something modifies supply for you. It doesn't. You're just using that economy point as supply. Supply points are consumed, needed to function. Energy is power needed for operations. Ammunition are required to fire heavy weapons. The number of heavy weapons listed on the bottom of some cards by the use of heavy weapon symbols. A maximum of 1 ammunition point may be allocated to each heavy weapon. Basically, a weapon will say at the bottom of it how much heavy weapon, how much ammunition you need to use. Research points represent scientific study, and repair points represent the ability to fix damage. Each repair point may fix 1 point of damage. Only a card in your active fleet may be fixed with repair points. There are 2 types of repair points, and the general repair point and healing point. Healing point is done to more beings, and is specific. Repair points more to ships and shields. So keep that in mind. Other types of points. Command points. Hey! Allow for extra ships, dragons, size, and play. Damage is the X symbol. There's Lobster there. That's from the Comedy Club expansion. Allocate to a monster equal to the monster's strength. Disengage the monsters for 1 complete turn. Yeah. Anyway, damage is the X. Only found the top right of cards that cause damage. It's considered damage is considered card damage, not weapons fire. Basically, it's different than weapons. Shields, I found top right most ships and base cards. They always function even when engaged. It's eliminated by 1 point of damage. After the shields are gone, the unit may sustain structural damage. Armor system, which is done in numbers that are located at the top right of the cards, are equipped with armor. They may be used only once every time damage would be applied to unit structure. They may not be used, however, to prevent damage from cards or weapons, which specifically cause structural damage. An armor system is used against an opponent's volley. The damage applies as structural damage is decreased by the current strength of the armor system. After each use, the armor system decreases by 1 strength. Use a die to indicate certain strength. Node are used on mechad ships. Energy allocated to electromagnetic fields. Phaser, little plus sign there. Phaser points are found at the bottom of many cards. Phasers cannot cause structural damage to terrain. Adding weapons represented by phaser point is considered a phaser, regardless of the name. And then, of course, heavy weapons is the square. Different for each empire. Each heavy weapon requires 1 ammunition point to fire. They can damage terrain. Again, there's probably a couple of things here that were, missing, but we can boast of the basics. Let's talk card types. Terrain! It's the T cards. Hey! T for terrain. It provides resources. That's it. That's the main function of it. Only structural damage cards can damage terrain. Heavy weapons are the only weapons which can cause damage to them. Yep. Ship cards. S. 2 basic types of ship cards, Empire ships and generic ships. Empire ships have a specific empire written on them, such as the name of them. Generic ships can be used by any empire. Dragon cards, designated with a D. They're a subset of ship cards, basically. They work like ship cards, except no equipment, crew cards, or occurrence cards can be played on them, or against them. So that's just a special thing to keep in mind on them. Again, we're just keeping to the basics here. B. Base cards. They play with terrain. They cannot be played independent of a terrain. A terrain card on which a base is played may not be the target of weapons fire until the base is destroyed. A base will not protect a terrain card from card damage. Excess damage applied to a base does not slash the terrain unless the base is played in reaction. Crew cards. C. They're played on a ship, base, or terrain. They have basic illustrations of the being of an empire. Only example of that. With those with point requirements may have points allocated them even if the location is disengaged. So like this cadet here doesn't have point requirements, you can just have them now. The N cards, ancient cards, found in Realm of the Ancients and other expansion sets. They're a subset of crew cards. They're treated as crews for all purposes, basically, but they have some special rules to them. Again, not going over the basics now. If you're playing with them, will I really get into them? A is ability cards. They modify the character's abilities of other cards. If they're played to crew in your fleet, unless they specify, they can be played as well. So most of the time, ability cards are crew-based things. You play an ability on a crew, unless the ability card specifically says you can play it somewhere else. Ability cards may not be engaged on a disengaged crew. So basically, it's connected with the crew card. It basically can only be used if it's on that crew. P is Psi cards. There's a subset of crew cards again. They're treated as crew for all non-Psi specific purposes. Cards played in crew can be played on Psis. Crews are never treated as Psi, but they are a subset of them. And only P cards are considered Psi cards. Field cards are designed with an F. They can be played on terrain in the fleet. A maximum of one field card may be played to a terrain. Field cards are only destroyed by the destruction of the terrain card in which they're played. So unlike a base, I can place multiple bases on a terrain. I just have to have that base to connect to that terrain. But for fields, I can play one per terrain that I have. Now here are the agenda cards, marked with a G. Again, because we already had an A, so, hey, gotta keep the letters going somewhere. AG. Anyway, each agenda has a hidden agenda rule and an exposed agenda. What do I mean by this? These are the two times it happens. A hidden agenda must be accomplished in full before it is played. When a hidden agenda is accomplished, the agenda card is immediately exposed from the hand, meaning played from the hand, and is not a card play, and the benefits are immediately gained. In our example here that I'm showing, the hidden one is each opponent has a time card in play. When each opponent has a time card in play, draw 3 cards. That means as soon as each opponent has a time card, I could expose this card from my hand and draw 3 cards. And it's not a card play. Now, there's also an exposed agenda, which are played prior to accomplishing the agenda. The benefit cannot be gained until one complete turn after the agenda is played. It means I play it, and I wait all the way until my next turn, and then I get the benefits of the exposed agenda. You can't play it. You may not accomplish the same agenda twice, 2 exact identical cards during a single complete turn. So that's another important thing to note, is multiple of the same card, you can have them. Even if I have 2 time manipulations, I can only play once per full turn. Full complete turn. Once accomplished, it's played on your Sector HQ/Psi network. When you reach 25 strength worth of agenda, immediately that Sector HQ or Psi network restores to 25 points of health. At this time, all agenda cards are discarded, and any further agenda cards are discarded. You can only do this once per game. So it's one of the only ways to heal up your sector base is, of course, to do 25 points worth of agenda. Which is a challenge in and of itself, but you could do it. Now we move on to E cards, equipment cards. They're designated with an E. They're only played to a ship or base. Now, as you can see with this one, it has a little P on the left corner under the illustration. It will either have that P or an NP. This depends on if it's a passive equipment or a non-passive equipment. Passive equipment are always played engaged. They're always engaged. They're passive. Non-passive equipment without a point requirement are played in the same position as the unit in which is played. So basically, if it doesn't have a point requirement, it matches the engagement or disengagement of whatever I play. Basically, you also have to keep note that non-passive equipment cannot be engaged or disengaged separate from the unit it's connected. So basically, if you have... This is especially important on equipment that would be non-passive that has a point requirement. I would need to basically pay the whatever it's attached to, ship or base, to engage it first before I'd engage the equipment. I couldn't engage that non-passive point value equipment. Those are the 3 types of equipment you kind of run across. Hazards are H cards. They're dangers you face in space. The card indicates how it works. What its play is, what its effects are, who is affected by it, all those kind of things on the hazard card. I are installation cards. These are like lost empire, ancient relics in the stellar galaxy in this area from some ancient group of people. They're abandoned, and empires can occasionally take them over. They are played independently. They're not bases, they're their own thing. But then we get into control and crew complement. So, when you play an installation, you're assumed to have a crew complement on board equal to the strength of the installation, plus the strength of all engaged crew in play on the installation. All of the players have a crew complement equal only to some strength of their engaged crew in play on that installation. So other people can play crew on there. But you can see this one here. Only crews with the highest strength crew in play can play on the installation. Others of lesser ones have to have one turn to get rid of it. Crew cannot be directly played to the installation. They must move via transport to the installation. Ancients are the exception and may be played directly onto the installation. But basically, whoever has the highest complement crew controls it. Multiple people can have multiple crews on there. But, again, you as the player get a bonus. The solitary one is +1, but yeah. Luck cards. L. They deal with lucky and unlucky situations. The card defines how it's played. Pretty simple. That's it. It comes to, they're either played to or against cards in play. What cards they affect, how they work, talks about it. M. Monster cards. They're space monsters. Each card defines how it's played, how it works, if it can be damaged, any damage it causes, if any, how it can be killed or negated. It only be repaired by cards which generate monster healing points. And, yeah. So, basic things are there. And M, Space Dragon, is not a D Dragon card. Keep that in mind, because there's M, Space Dragon. Occurrence card, which are done with a O. These are an occurrence. Basically, it's making an event that's occurring. The occurrence card defines how the event is, how it works, what damage it causes, how it could be negated. And then finally, the only card that can be played on your Sector HQ, a headquarters card. Remember, we already had H, so of course we have this different card here. They're played to Sector HQ. They are destroyed by weapons that equal to their strength. Weapons damage equal to their strength. So they don't really take damage. They're destroyed only if you do... Like this one here has 1. So if you do 1 damage to it, it's destroyed. But if it was, like, say, a 9, you'd have to do 9 damage to it to destroy it. They will only be targeted by weapons eligible to target the Sector HQ. Meaning if your Sector HQ has to be exposed to attack in order to damage it. And only Q cards may be played to or against Q cards. And headquarters do not protect Sector HQs. So they are separate from that, but they can be targeted if your Sector HQ being targeted. Hey, maybe it's useful to target to get rid of it and its abilities rather than target some extra damage to Sector HQ when I can't destroy the Sector HQ. Get rid of the headquarters, weaken the other side so I can continue to pound their Sector HQ. Things like that. So there's good reason. But hey, there is Galactic Empires. I hope you enjoyed diving into this, maybe not forgotten CCG, but one that has definitely lost its ability to be followed, and we don't see people. It doesn't have support anymore. I think that's the other thing. It just does not have support anymore, unfortunately. It's a game which may be dead for good because the bankruptcy has had its ownership go who knows where. Who controls it? We're not really sure at this point in time. And will someone buy it? Will someone control it? Will someone resurrect this old CCG? I don't know. But for now, it's good to learn about it. It's interesting play. It's the first sci-fi CCG that came into being. It might be even the possible third CCG. It's in that time where it's kind of hard to tell who came out first. With a lot of developments there. But really, being the first sci-fi CCG, impressive thing. Really cool thing. And it was really neat to take all the time and dive deep into this here, and I hope you enjoyed hanging with me the long time this video took, so sorry about that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Hey, Remember, check out all my other stuff, whether it's live on Twitch or on YouTube. If you want to check out either of my schedule, I put that up on my social media, which is a great place to see what's going on with me, updates, cat pictures, all that stuff. That's my Discord, my Blue Sky, my Twitter, X, and the schedule also goes up on my About page, my community page on my YouTube channel. Hey, the Twitch side, it's relatively accurate, but usually because of life stuff, it's a little bit more flexible on that end. But what I'm doing on those days is really pretty accurate. The YouTube side is much more accurate. That schedule, I only delay if there's video problems, so keep that in mind. Remember, check out live plays I've done of TCGs or TTRPGs. Those are a lot of fun. Remember, check out all my other CCG and role-playing related stuff. All that's really great. Check out all those older videos. I've done a bunch of these videos where I talk about the history of CCGs and older ones, multiple videos. Maybe I'll split these ones in the future more, because this was a pretty long video. It's a pretty long video essay, so I don't know if it would be worth it to split two, keep it as one, maybe do one for gameplay, one for everything else. I don't know. I'll think about it. I'll see what you say in the description below in the discussion. That's a good question. What do you think about that? Or think about this game in general? While you're like this striking the bell, leave that comment. Let me know what you think about Galactic Empires. Would you want it to come back? Would you want to try it? What do you think about this video? Anyway, I'm going to get going. I'm going to go hang out on Twitch, maybe do some more videos. And until the next time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.